I have another prescription of a certain kind of spectrum spectacles that I truly believe that some of you will find this to be a way, as you might think of it, to temporarily answer and explain a lot of things that seem to be inexplicable, that seem to be so tied up with so-called psychological influences into the behavior of man, and then after I have been kicking and stomping on it, that should have left you wondering, in some respects, what could be a possible, quote, answer or a possible way to, quote, look at this particular problem. So here it is. If I muddied that up too much, I expect that many of you will find this to be truly a milk dud in the theater of life. Not only a milk dud, but you should find a girl with real long hair in front of you that you can chew on it and then throw it in her hair. That is, one purpose of talk is to adjust oneself to the inevitable. If we lived in paradise, that'd be the end of it. But at least remember that part. I'm going to give you a test tied to that. That one real unrecognized purpose, one purpose of human talk is to adjust oneself to the inevitable. You are surrounded by this. For the time being, I'll talk as though it is occurring externally. Because as always, with most people, that is the easiest first place to look. But in the ordinarily wired affairs of man, much of what is criticized in the body of humanity, much of what is laughed at, the basis of much cynicism, and as I said, the basis of many so-called psychological feelings that there are inexplicable areas of human behavior are right here. That is right where I have described. The numerous attacks that have been made religiously, socially, politically, psychologically against much human talk, of it being condemned as being mechanical, being useless, being frivolous, being self-serving, being the stating of the obvious, being whining, being expressions of self-pity, being attempts to escape one's responsibilities. Any possible accusation that you can think about, that you've ever heard of, directed toward human talk, I have covered in that statement. That one of the real purposes of talk is to adjust oneself to the inevitable. And once you begin to see it, I am suggesting most strongly to you, some of you may have already got a glimpse of it already, that at least, I'll be conservative, at least 90% of the very kinds of condemnation your own partnership is wont to engage in directed toward other people, the kinds of criticism of you being this critic on Life's Invisible Daily Planet newspaper about other people flapping their gums, people talking about things they don't understand, people talking about things they can't change, people just talking like routine madmen and madwomen. This is it. You can see it through these kinds of glasses. You can see it through this kind of approach that I am putting in words for you, that one of the real purposes of talk is simply to adjust oneself to the inevitable. And I have been referring to the explaining of oneself again in the last few weeks. All forms of explaining oneself are attempted accommodations to the inevitability of ordinary people continuing to forever be themselves. That's it. As far as words in a 3D world, in a 3D world of conscious conversation and interplay between you and I, that is as good as can be covered. That all attempts for you to say, for anyone else to say, forgive me, I didn't mean you. Every attempt, you can hear it, you can see it. Some of you should be able just to see it immediately after I first gave you this notion when I started. That every attempt for a person to say, hey, I'm not that kind of person, or on the contrary, for a person to say, wait, I'll tell you the kind of guy I am. Once you see it, it is the continuing attempt for that person to accommodate themselves to the upcoming inevitability of them continuing to be themselves. That's it. That is why people explain themselves. Taking it into another area, verbally, that I've been mentioning. People state conclusions about themselves on the basis of, well, I'm not like that. I wouldn't do that. I'm not that sort of person. They're stating conclusions about themselves, and it's operating kind of like a pre-opened valve to relieve what is known to be the inevitable pressure that's going to come up. It is always a matter of upcoming inevitability. For the benefit of those of you that heard this almost as soon as I started this evening, you can find, with just one area of exception, you can find the validity of this. You can find it has meaning in everything that every other human says. That there is some validity, there is some connection between what I'm telling you and everything, no matter what it seems to be cast as, no matter what seems to be its ostensive purpose. One of the reasons that anybody talks is to try and adjust themselves to the upcoming inevitability. People who bitch about their marriage. An old example I pull up periodically. Guy staying at a bar talking to his barmates, crying, whining, bitching, shaking his fist at his wife, is the way it used to go. And somebody finally, after agreeing, yeah, an old example I pull up periodically. Guy staying at a bar talking to his barmates, crying, whining, bitching, shaking his fist at his wife, is the way it used to go. And somebody finally, after agreeing, yeah, women are a pain, I don't blame you, everything you say I can agree with. How long have you been married? Man says, 45 years. But I'm going to leave her tomorrow. Or a man or a woman complaining about their job, the way they're mistreated, the kinds of unusual expectations and demands the job makes upon them. They're unappreciated. Every year it comes about, they have to set up the annual holiday parties. They have to do this for the boss. They have to do this for a certain segment of the workforce there, and no one appreciates it. And you hear this complaint, and then the person points out. And this has been going on, they say, for 35 years. Now, an ordinary conversation within your own partnership is very likely wired up to make some comment, if it's going to make any. It's not so common now as to go unnoticed. If it's going to make some comment, that kind of partnership criticism, the kind of inner voices that are wired up in everyone, would make some comment like, well, that man's an idiot. He's either an idiot for putting up with that, if he's telling the truth, I don't know. But he's an idiot for putting up with that, but he's an idiot times two to stand around here and complain about it. And his wife says, yeah, every year about this time, he does it. And you can say, well, what a waste. man might as well be struck dumb. He's got no sense, got no business being able to engage in human conversation. It's just a waste of time. And it's not a waste of time. That person, that molecule in the body of life is adjusting itself. It is accommodating itself once again. It's straightening out its clothes and accommodating itself to what every human knows is the upcoming inevitability of it all. And I suggest to you, although this becomes a four-dimensional Mobius strip that I'm not going into, without the ability to talk, people could not arrange and adjust themselves to the inevitability of no change, and therefore they would go mad. But the 4D Mobius strip part is, were it not for the ability to be able to think about such as this, they could not, of course, think about the inevitability of change, and of course they could not talk, and if they could not talk, they could not think of this. And you've got to be able to think about this to talk to start with. But all that notwithstanding, if that could be penetrated, if that could be turned into truly an isolated form of triaxial reality, then people would go crazy. People would explode, people would implode if they could not talk. And if they could not talk in the very ways that many, many people, including your own partnerships and corporations, find fault with. That is mechanical talk, self-serving talk, stating the obvious, whining about that you either won't change or can't change. If you listen, those of you that can hear it, it does not have to be as extreme as some of the examples that I have made and may make in the next few minutes. You are surrounded by it. There is some basis for some people, not that they understood it, but for some segments of life's body, to believe that most human conversation on some grand scale or from some great cosmic view is a waste of time. That is not without validity. But as I said, if we could drag it all down to an isolated three-dimensional reality and leave it at that, then if you took away the ability for people to talk, to simply flap their gums and their lips in the breeze, apparently engaged in nothing except self-serving conversation, if they could not do that, they would either or explode. They would go mad. Because they are adjusting themselves to the upcoming inevitability of it all, especially themselves. Once you can begin to see and to hear that this kind of talk is not to be condemned as easily as saying, well, that kind of speech is just mechanical. That shows that's the kind of thing that ordinary people would engage in. Saints preserve me from talking in such a way. This in some way is to be overcome. These people should be able to see that they are speaking almost as undirected robots. You've got to see that this is as important as oil is to an internal combustion engine. That there is some validity to me saying that all ordinary talk, to some degree, are the people involved, are the speaker's adjustment to the inevitable. Once you hear it, there it is. It is not, let me add again for the night, it is not within the realm of ordinarily conceived of and defined psychological areas in life. It is as physical, material, molecular as the operations of the respiratory system. It is a kind of gasping for reasonable oxygen, for reasonable breath, for people to say, well, I'm not that kind of person. But don't try and put that jive on me. I don't put up with that kind of crap. Or for people to express their acceptance on a continuing basis of bad luck, for people to say, I don't believe that I deserve any better. I know that things are not going to change. And on the contrary, for those who say, well, once you're knocked down like I have just been, you've got to get up, brush yourself off, and press on. Once you can hear this, it doesn't matter whether somebody says, well, once you're down, you're down. If at first you don't succeed, fuck it. That is the same, it's based upon the same operations I'm describing to you as it is for a man to say, never say die. You got no difference between Professor Henry Hill and a would-be suicide. They are both adjusting themselves to their upcoming inevitability of forever being themselves. Once you hear this also, it's beyond any possible question or debate as to whether people can change, whether people really believe they can change like they say. Once you can hear this, there's no longer a question. It's not open to any sort of theoretical debate. There's no need for you to feel as though you're on some eternal or some continuing search to pierce the reality of this. Because people are admitting, it is the sound of life itself coming out through men, is people admitting that they are part of the inevitable, at least in their lifetime, which is the only thing that's important to ordinary consciousness. That what is taking place is inevitable. And they are admitting that. Admitting is not the word, but there is no English, or there is no any word on this planet for what I mean. It is simply it is an oral manifestation of the reality that it is inevitable. That is what is taking place within that person. And you can hear in everything they say, almost from the most innocuous and simplistic, such as hello and goodbye, from that to what would appear to be attempts at deep, complex self-analysis. Once you hear it, you are hearing life itself expressed on the level of us, of humanity. It's groans and creaks, it is admissions, orally, that the inevitable is still upon us. And that's what people are saying when they state conclusions regarding themselves, conclusions regarding other people. But for tonight, let me leave it at what appears to be self-directed. That talk, one of the purposes of talk, is to adjust oneself to the inevitable. It is the continuing accommodation to the inevitable. And that's what they're saying. That's what all people are saying by stating what kind of person they are. Can any of you see any connection? I didn't plan to take this anywhere. Can any of you see any possible connection between this and my erstwhile suggestion, cum strong suggestion, that if you would attempt to change something in you, is do not tell yourself what you are doing. Don't tell yourself what you're planning to do. Don't tell yourself if you have done it. Don't say, well, it's been 2 weeks since I had any gin. Don't say anything. It's in that sense that there seems to be partnership within the ordinary consciousness of ordinary people. Do not let this information into the partnership. That I want to change, I'm going to start changing tomorrow, or I am in the midst of change and I have changed. I have been changed now for 2.5 months. Can any of you see any connection between the real validity of that, those of you that suspect any, between that and what I'm talking about now? That one purpose of talk is to adjust oneself to the inevitable. What if you could refrain from talking? That'd be easy enough if you, of course, if you children think I just meant to hush. Almost anybody can stop talking. But what if you could actually stop talking? Second paragraph. Someone once noted or asked the cynically philosophical question, what kind of truth is it that varies from village to village and changes from time to time? Now, if all of you were still back in kindergarten, or if you were back in the complete hands of line level consciousness, that's the kind of question that should have intrigued you years ago. Or else be able to see or hear within that not a question, but a statement with which you could agree. The question/statement, what kind of truth is it that varies from village to village and from place to place? All right, I'll answer it for you. It's the real truth. It's the only permanent truth. And yet, of course, I say of course, at the ordinary level, the intention of the statement, obviously, being that, boy, that's no kind of truth, that something is wrong with the consciousness, with the attitude of humanity, that here in one part of the world, in one village, one thing is true. Then you go right over the mountain, around the curve to this other village, this other group, this other tribe, and what they call truth is in conflict. Or what was called truth 200 years ago was not truth 1,000 years ago. And so that part of life's body playing out this part sneers, if not with their lips, with their pen, and they say, what kind of truth is that? What kind of truth does man believe he has if the truth varies from village to village and it changes from time to time? Now, that sounds like, to ordinary consciousness, a quite valid, if not piercing, statement, condemnation of man's folly. And yet the condemnation is extreme folly. Because as they're putting it, this truth that varies from village to village is the only possible truth. Or truth that changes from time to time, that would be the only permanent truth there is. The tacit part of their statement, of course, being, if there was a real truth, it'd be the same here with these people, and it'd be the same over here. And it'd be the same right now as it was 500 years ago, and if we could come back 500 years hence, it would still be true. That, say they, or that, say a part of life's body, would be real truth. Now, I hate to say this, but that's not true. But that being the case, do you understand why this sort of activity, no matter where and when, never is mentioned by ordinary people in the same breath as Motherhood, Flag Day, Bastille Day, the 4th of July? There seems to be no direct connection between this kind of activity, even if people suspect at different villages, at different times, that something is going on. They never mistake it for some serious engagement with the great truths. Life seems to allow some molecules, some cells in its body around this kind of activity, perhaps to find it of some passing interest. But insofar as mistaking it for some serious statement of the truth, there's no danger. Because it cannot fit the tacit criteria involved in the statement that I started out with, that I re-noted for you that had been noted. That is, what kind of truth is it that varies from village to village and changes from time to time? This kind of activity cannot fit that. A question, sort of, from one of you that I wanted to Several weeks ago, if you remember, I had everyone write down what they considered to be an answer, some serious verbal answer that they believed that they had surmised, discovered, come up with since being involved with this, if you recall. And then we laid them down, and everybody came up and got a different one and looked at the answer that someone had written and attempted to write some question. That is one of these that I brought. The person wrote down this answer. There are no answers. Another person picked this up and wrote, what is the answer? As the question. Now that sounds, I'm sure to you people, to be close to a verbal truism, and many people out in the ordinary world. If we didn't stretch it much further than that, just this kind of tenuous epigrammatic byplay here to say there are no answers, you would get some people out in the ordinary world. If you didn't go any further and waste any more of their time, would go, yeah, you're right. But this needs to be pursued a bit further with you people to say there are no answers. And the question to go with that is, what is the answer? The answer is, there are no answers. That's not exactly right. Now, I know full well that many of you believe that I would jump right up and agree with that, or that in some way you have taken that from me, you have put it together, if there was some way to codify into one sentence what I've been talking about for lo these many hours, that would surely be, there are no answers. And that's not exactly right. I know many of you think that that sounds okay. And if I hadn't been pissed already tonight, I'd have let it pass. But it's not exactly right to say there are no answers. Let's put it this way. There are no, quote, answers in the realm of the kind of currency that ordinary people deal with verbally. Put another way, there are answers, in quotation marks, but they are not of the cul-de-sac kind of yellow circuit conclusions that ordinary people ordinarily accept. Now, if you get any glimpse of that, you will see that molecularly, not just verbally, within the operations of your own complete nervous living system, that it can be understood why you or someone else could come to the conclusion that, well, there are no answers. There are some answers. There may be the answer. But it is not in the realm of yellow circuit conclusions. And it's in the realm of yellow circuit inquiries that such questions arise. And so then to tell that same general area within a man's nervous system, within his own actual being, the right you part, you ask the question. And everything that you would assume could be the answer would be so limited, would be so restricted, as to make it fairly correct to say, to go ahead and agree with you and say there are no answers, based upon yellow circuit activity and yellow circuit conclusions. What you're asking, then it's right for you to say, all right, there are no answers. In your case, it's right. But it's not really true. There are answers, but they are not within yellow circuit conclusions. Now, I wanted to bring that out because several people, I read through all these, and several people had variations of this. And it may sound as though you were suddenly a real stand-up kind of guy or gal to write down, all right, the greatest thing I've learned, my answer I'm going to put down here is, there are no answers. This was not the only person that did that. There were variations. At least you think that you are onto something serious, which is always a mistake. At least you think that you have come to some conclusion. Because there are answers. But they are not found within ordinary yellow circuit activity. They are not found in the same area that can make such a statement as there are no answers. That is the dirty deed. That is when you have to go from a three-dimensional Mobius strip into whatever a four-dimensional Mobius strip would be. Next paragraph. I have a question that has long troubled my soul. I always wanted to say that. I always wanted a soul, to tell you the truth. But not having one, at least I wanted to say that. And I got it off my chest and I feel much better. Well, not much better. The question is this. Why would any truly intelligent person own anything that they didn't find to either be useful or beautiful? If I'm not mistaken, I have heard or read somewhere, just in the ordinary world, of man being described or characterized in his uniqueness on the basis that he is the only being on this planet, the only creature, the only animal that collects stuff. Chimpanzees, dogs, anything you compare it to, they don't collect anything. It's only man. And it doesn't matter how civilized or how feral he seems to be. He may be collecting skulls of his enemies, he may be collecting hides of animals he's killed, or he may be collecting moths, painted eggshells, stamps. But if you look at our clothes, no sense women getting out of this, clothes and men. Everybody collects something. Everybody has possessions. Possessions that they do not actually need. That is, they do not sustain life. They're things that you own. But I'm asking you, of course I'm referring to real unusual people like us when I say truly intelligent. Why would a truly intelligent person own anything that they didn't either find useful or beautiful? And then I ask you, we have a few seconds, I believe, extra on this side of the tape. Let's all think, just for a few seconds, do you own things, do you have things that you can't really say are useful? That is, you've never used them. Or, if they're not useful, you're not ever going to use them, you didn't plan to use them, you've never used them, no chance of ever using them, but they are something that you look upon and you're glad you got it because to you, it is beautiful. All right, now everybody think right quick. See if you try real hard if you can think of anything, things that you may have, that you own, that does not fit into my classification of it either being useful or beautiful. All right, here we go. Everybody think real hard. Don't put your heads on your desk. Just think real hard. Here we go. All right, that's enough time. Do you not find that interesting? Those of you who don't find it interesting, you didn't understand it. Those of you who do not find it interesting, do not hear me. Those of you that do not find that interesting, you don't believe that you've got stuff that's not useful nor beautiful. Why would anybody own such things? Now let's take that marvelous jump from what apparently had to do with some kind of clothes or books or records or musical instruments or china, figurines. Let's jump from that foolish, silly, obvious world into the real one. What possible application could that have to one's so-called inner life? I'm assuming already that you people, being the truly intelligent that I was referring to initially, that you do already understand that, hey, there's a point there that has some significance that I might be able to use Just think about all the stuff I own. If I had to move tomorrow, all the stuff I'd have to pack up, rent a truck or two. And I hear a piece of what you're saying, that why do I own anything? In the few seconds I gave you, and if you're really trying, most of your possessions should have come to mind. I've got stuff that is not useful, not to me. That's all we're talking about. It's to you. It's not useful, nor is it beautiful. And yet I got it. And I have to pay in time and effort, and perhaps truck rental, to carry this around. I paid for it to begin with. I bought this. And it's not useful to me, and it's not beautiful to me. Now how about that great personal inner world? How about what seems to be one's own habits? What seems to be one's own desires? Why would you have any? You might say that it's possible that a person could dispose of those acquisitions, those physical things that one now has, that indeed are neither useful nor beautiful, that you could certainly throw them away if you really bit your tongue. Perhaps it might even serve a purpose. At least it would free you from feeling like you had more belongings owning you than vice versa. But do not think that that would be the easy and the obvious, or at least the possible, and overlook the whole purpose of me bringing this up. If you can hear any of that, how can you still call yourself truly intelligent if you've got anything within you that you entertain, that you continue to own? At least you tacitly acquiesce to ownership. Of course, some of you in a weak moment might look at it vice versa, but you are still, even if it was vice versa, and say, well, my habits own me. That's the same thing. That's like saying, well, I've got 14 closets full of clothes that I bought, and I spent so much I can't just go give them to Salvation Army. Or I've got all these books that I bought, and I never read them, but Jesus Christ, I can't throw them away. Someday I might want to read them. Or they take up wall space. Well, I got too much invested. Whatever it is, I can't simply throw them away. They sort of own me. That's the same thing. All you people should be able to see that by now. You don't have any passing acquaintance with triaxial consciousness if you can't see that vice versa is always vice versa. So you make a mistake if you do not see that everything that passes for desires, habits, wants, needs, fears, there are things you own. I ask you again, why would a truly intelligent person own anything that was neither useful nor beautiful to them? Now, jumping back and forth as, forget that silly speed of light, but jumping back and forth from what might be the unreal into the allegorical, from the paradigmatic into the impossible, could any of you see that here yet again is a place that would be possibly beneficial for even extraordinary people like you, that is, truly intelligent men and women, to take a binary course of action, to consider the binary approach of action, because this one is so far removed from lateral reality that it should be a subcategory of its own. That is, you could take this as a battle cry, as a charging cry, and I don't mean anything related to a Visa or a MasterCard. You could take it as a dictum, as tonight's epigram. That would be either buy it all or give up shopping. But if you're going to piddle around, or as my Uncle Fred used to say, if you're going to fiddle fuck around, you keep acquiring these things. Maybe you hadn't acquired any in a while, but you look up on them and you own these things that are neither useful nor beautiful. You suffer over it sometimes if it's brought out to you, if somebody points it out. Sometimes just on your own you look around and think, good God, how much I got tied up in this crap. In fact, it's so much that I'd die if something happened to it. Yet I don't use it, and it's not beautiful. That is, as per Uncle Fred, that's fiddle fucking with it. That is piddling. An almost right-handed, right-angle approach would be what I was trying to put into words right then very quickly for you, is you could take the approach of either buy it all, not just a few, whatever it is. You buy tools. I know some of you men, I've heard you express your addiction to buying tools. Some people buy books. I've even heard some people buy records. Musical instruments, clothes, gardening tools, furniture, little paintings on velvet of Jesus and unicorns with these real big eyes. But you're just piddling around unless you'll buy it all. It's take every cent that you're not spending on rent and clothes and food and buy it all, spend it all there, or else give up shopping. Any middle ground is for the middle-aged. The middle ground is the same kind of safe refuge, as I mentioned in another context, for the boorish, the uncouth. It's not my fault that they have translated Buddha's words into supposed acclamations, encouragements to pursue a middle ground, a course of moderation, because to that I say BD, Balder Dash. That's only for the weak. That's only for the indecisive. Only ordinary people worry about giving up a habit. Only people who are still plagued, shattered, followed by ordinary impulses ask me and write me, "Dear doctor, I continue to worry about whether I smoke too much. Should I quit it? Or what do you say? I worry about that I eat too much food. I worry about that I am maybe overweight and should lose weight. I worry about this or that." It's the quite ordinary that are going to suffer in such a manner. Because if you can learn how to do it, if you understood how to do it, it doesn't much matter if you own what seems to be some bad habits. But if you cannot see that they are either useful or beautiful, and then you believe that this is a quandary, and it has the proper edge, the apparent three-dimensional motivating edge of guilt. Unless you can get beyond that, then you have either got to buy it all or give up shopping. That is, if you're worried about eating too much salt, eating too much chocolate, smoking, drinking, whatever it was. I have mentioned, as strange as it sounds, if you can't stop it, or if you, let's be magnanimous to you truly intelligent people, if you don't choose to stop it, then you must choose, if you're asking me the way to go about this, then you must choose to stop thinking about stopping. You either got to buy it all or give up shopping. There is no such ground as moderation. Is working on it, thinking about it, suffering over it. Perhaps if I suffer a little more, perhaps if I worry a little more, something will motivate me to change. The great motivation, the edge in all of human motivation, to put in some words, seems to be that edge, that motivating edge of guilt. So it is improper to believe that the expected conclusion for my guilt is going to be to change. Nay, nay. The guilt, the suffering over it, is the motivation itself. It is a purpose within itself. It is an end within itself, as opposed to some sort of means, as opposed to some sort of road that I'm going to travel that's going to make me a better person or a worse person. It's going to come to any conclusion. It's just going to roll right along. If you could do anything, it would either be buy it all. If you're going to collect moss, if you're going to collect stamps, sell every other fucking thing you got, put yourself on eating a half a grapefruit a week, sell your car, walk everywhere you go, take every cent you've got and buy every goddamn stamp that you can ever find. Every time you find one for sale, buy it. Either that or you got to give it up completely. By give it up, it's not just buying any more stamps. You can't read about buying stamps. You can't think about buying stamps. You got to take all the stamps you got. It's not important. Burn them, throw them away, sell them, if you're intelligent. But get rid of them, and that's it. You got to give up shopping for stamps. If you have that which seems to be useless and unbeautiful to you, some habit, desire, fear, daydream, nightmare, either buy them all or give it up. But there is no proper question, no proper sustained question from people who would be properly involved with this to say, hey, I got something that I suffer over. I don't know whether I suffer enough to put forth a great amount of effort to quit. What do you think? I just told you. If you're going to ask a serious question as to, well, I've been suffering, I feel guilty about doing certain things I do. Either stop it, or if you knew how to do it, it's almost the same thing. It is almost the same thing, is to stop trying to stop it. Stop thinking about trying to stop it. But you can't have it any other way. But if you're ordinary, you can only have it that way. Because the ordinary can't change. And they can't stop thinking about changing. So there you are. A final thing I want to say about conclusions. I've been talking about conclusions. A final thing for tonight. Since I assume that all of you believe that you have heard me for the last few weeks, absolutely. Giving conclusions their rightful hell. And kicking conclusions about, ripping at them intellectually, emotionally, kicking their little butts if you could do so physically, giving them holy hell. Anyone who believes that, you're wrong again. Let's get into serious business. Short and sweet, but all of you should be able to hear this. We've talked about such matters before. But it affects everyone to some degree. All of you are involved with something like this continually. Almost all of you. All of you. Almost all of you. Is there is a place for conclusions with a few people, and that is, it's a kind of willful, induced, forced, artificial, if you will, conclusions. They're like personal conclusions in your own private universe of personal affairs. It is in such as relationships, sexual between people. There could be friendship among some of you people. There could be family. Here it is, again, surprise, surprise, there seems to be some sort of conflict, some non-meeting of the minds here. That is the nature of the mortal nexus. And many of you still write me. And if you don't write me, you write your damn self about these confrontations, these disputes amongst yourselves. And it's up to a few people, it's up to you, who I'm talking to see that there comes a time continually that you've got to induce willfully your own conclusion. It'll be such as this. You simply turn to somebody when, don't make me have to drag out some great complex example. There just seems to be some kind of argument. I asked you to get so-and-so for me. No, you didn't. You didn't mention it. Yeah, I did. I asked you to get it for me. You make your own conclusion. You say, hey, whatever it is under discussion, it was my doing, I take responsibility, forget it. You could call it concluding it. It is not a natural phenomenon in the world. Do not expect to pay your money to the Smithsonian Institute and to find that being part of the benefits, besides receiving the magazine and getting cut rates at the door. Do not expect to become a naturalist, a botanist. This is not a part of the natural order of things. Conclusions happen in life. It's the very thing I've been talking about for the last several weeks. But these kind of conclusions do not happen. They are willful. It takes an extraordinary person, as simple as it sounds. You ought to be able to hear this by now. Ordinary people do not do this. They simply do not. And it's simple to say. If we took it out of the realm of apparently me talking to you people on some extraordinary basis, and I was just playing Dr. Ruth Westenheimer and saying, all right, the way to get along in a relationship, if you got a man or woman and you're involved and you're trying to keep the relationship going, don't argue over crap like that. When you see that an argument that you're at loggerheads over something, let me tell you a secret. Just turn to the other person and say, you know what, you're right. It was my fault. And people go, yeah, you're right. But you surely by now understand that the really mystical, the occult in life is the obvious, is the simplistic. That do not happen. People do not do that. Somebody might do that if they heard a sex therapist or a psychologist in a book say at one time. Somebody might say to themselves, hey, that's a good idea. I should do that. And agree with it. But that is not the way things work. But that is the way that you people should be working. As any time, which is almost all the time, there seems to be some difference. There's an imbalance between you and another person, between you and another group of people. Energy is being transferred the way it should be in the ordinary world, but here you are, and you're trying not to simply be powerful. You're trying to be efficient for your own reasons. And this transfer of energy is not benefiting you. You see what it is. There's no need to go into specifics. It is simply we are disagreeing. We're arguing. It is a conflict of some kind over whose fault it is. Who should have done what? And you conclude it. It is willful. It is intentional. And now you should understand why I started out and said, from a certain view, it's artificial. Because you can say, well, you could say you don't mean it. And that's not the proper way to put it. From an ordinary viewpoint, consciousness could say, well, you're acting because you don't really mean it. Ordinary consciousness would have missed the point. It's beyond any point of you don't mean it. The only people that mean things are those people who are tied up in the mechanical flow of the ordinary nexus of life. They're the only ones that mean something. So when an ordinary person says, listen, I did tell you to do so and so, God damn it, and don't tell me I didn't. Now they mean that. Another person says, well, you can say that, and you're bigger than me, and you may hit me in the mouth again. But I'm telling you, you didn't tell me that. That person means that. If you're ordinary, you mean it all. You got no choice. You're dealing with the inevitable. If you're going to find any surcease from that kind of continual suffering, which you've got to do, to have the kind of time, to have the kind of energy to do anything extraordinary, you got to stop all that. You got to stop it as soon as you hear it, or you should be stopping it. And either do it directly, simplistically, as I'm putting it in words to the person, but you conclude it. You willfully, and as I said in that sense, artificially, that is, you have interfered with the normal flow of energy on such a small scale it doesn't matter, except to you. As you conclude it by saying, hey, that was my doing, that was my responsibility. If you must do it in words, whatever the words are appropriately, simplistically, no long dragged out, or perhaps the blender was on when I said that, maybe you didn't hear me. Fuck all that. You simply have got to say, if not in these words, you've got to say by your intention, it's I'm taking the responsibility of it. It's everything. I'm just hesitating to tell you people to tell somebody it's my fault because I've already told you that you shouldn't be doing that to each other. If possible, it's not for mystical verbal reasons. You shouldn't really be going around in life telling people, "Ah, it's my fault." Of course, part of the trick in that is you should not be doing such things as you got to tell anybody, even ordinary civilians, that, "Hey, I'm sorry. It's too late." Whatever it was that made you say, "I'm sorry," is the kind of thing that will kill you. It's the kind of thing that will keep you right where you are. So even amongst yourselves, I just was hedging around verbally rather than saying, "I'm sorry." It's just take responsibility. It's to tell a person, "Wait a minute, this has gone far enough. I didn't say it loud enough. It's my responsibility. What's going on right now is my responsibility. Stop it. It's over. That's the end of it. I'm responsible. I'm taking responsibility. Forget it." Whether in a situation it's proper to go or not. As you're saying, I am concluding it. And of course, when you do it, what you're going to find out is people accept it. You have got to conclude it. We're running out of tape. Stop right quick so I can put on a task. The task. Now next week, I want everyone to do this. I want you to find, all you got to do is listen. You don't have to write them down. You might like to, I suggest to you. But I want you to hear and to mentally be able to write down and strike you 8 examples of other people, not you, of hearing other people, either in person, on TV, even in books, what they wrote. Examples of talk, just obviously, once you hear it, once you see it, being their adjustment to the upcoming, the continuing, inevitable. I just want you to be able to pick out 8. You just hear them. They're short, they're sweet. Once you begin to hear it, as I said, they're everywhere. Ciao, ciao.